welcome to Intercontinental Bali Resort. We are representing the Risk and Security Department and would like to deliver a safety briefing. Please note that today we are not conducting any evacuation drills nor maintenance for our fire suppressant system. If you hear any alarm or announcement to evacuate from our public address system, please do the following. Keep calm and don't panic. Immediately move away from the source of the fire. Our team will direct you to an assembly point located in the parking area in front of the lobby. All meeting rooms are fitted with fire protection systems, such as smoke detectors and fire sprinklers. Hydrants and fire extinguishers are available within 15 meters of your location. Follow the exit sign in each room to lead you to the nearest safe area. This room is also fitted with emergency exit doors and push bars. For an unpredictable earthquake event, during the heavy shock, please follow the procedures of drop, cover, and hold on. When the shock stops, please follow the direction from our emergency team to the nearest safe assembly point. If you hear the tsunami alarm and an announcement to evacuate from our public addresses system, please stay calm and stay away from the beach area. Follow the directions from our emergency team along with the evacuation signs to get to the nearest tsunami assembly point located on the 4th floor of the building. Thank you for your kind attention on the safety briefing and wish you a safe and successful meeting ahead.
Welcome to each and every one of you. As we Balinese say, Om Swastiastu. How are you this morning, ladies and gentlemen? Great. Thank you for coming and really happy to welcome all of you here. Ladies and gentlemen, to all of our fellow Trojans and friends and honorable panelists, welcome to the second day of Asia Pacific Business Forum Indonesia 2022. Presented by USC and USC Marshall School of Business IBER MBA program. First of all, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kismania, and I'm very honored and delighted to be your master of ceremony for today's event. And we hope that you enjoy your breakfast earlier this morning with more energy to join our various panel sessions today. As the aim of this forum, ladies and gentlemen, to be a learning moment for our fellow Trojans in embracing change, adapt, and adjust to sustain the new normal, sharing empowerment and breakthrough, and also expand our networking, and that is what we are about to hear from our panelists through their various perspective and background. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our agenda today, please allow me to give you a little highlight and hospitality arrangement information. Today, we will have 4 panel discussion and business matchmaking session at the end of our panel session today. And our agenda will conclude around 5 p.m. this afternoon. We will have 15 minutes of break from each panel session for both morning and afternoon session. Coffee and snack will be provided at the foyer area of this ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, as for the networking lunch session, will be located at the same area you have your breakfast this morning. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us start our first panel session of the day. But first of all, please allow me to boost your morning spirit. I would like to invite to join me. When I say fellow Trojan, you can say fight on, okay? Can we do that together? All right, let me try. Fellow Trojan? One more time. Fellow Trojan? Can we have a round of big applause for each and every one of you, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for joining with me. We hope that you're ready for the first panel session. Fellow friends and friends, we will start our first panel session in topic of supply chain disruption. Over the past few years, due to trade wars, the COVID pandemic, flooding, the war in Ukraine, economic sanctions have severely challenged the just-in-time inventory practices developed over the past decade. Our panelists will share their ideas on how firms are becoming more supply chains resilient while still maintaining competitive cost structures. Allow me to introduce to you to our moderator for this panel, Professor Voigt. Teaches business policy, competitive strategy, entrepreneurship and venture initiation, and global strategy and international management. He is Academic Director for International Business Education and Research and Professor of Clinical Management and Organization at the University of Southern California. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin our first panel session on supply chain disruptions and give round of big applause to our distinguished moderator, Professor Voigt. The floor is yours.
So I want to thank our moderator for that introduction. I want to invite our panelists, Prashant and Budi, to come on up and join me on the podium here. I'm going to, because we're getting a late start, we've lost our 15 minutes of Q&A already. I'm going to skip the introduction that I had planned and go straight to just a brief introduction of our speakers. Many of you have already met Prashant. He is, I think, well known to those of us in the IBEC community. But very briefly, and in today's world, you all have, we all sit there with LinkedIn, with Google, so it doesn't make sense for me to go through a deep introduction. But my experience in meeting Prashant, I met him and began conversations with him. I would simply say he's a consultant, he's an advisor, he's had a significant experience in the financial services sector, and most importantly, I would argue that he's a reflector on ideas. He's a deep thinker. He's a teacher, and he's become a friend of mine and a friend of Marshall. Budi, I have not had the long experience. We had a chance to chat. He is Indonesian. He comes from Indonesia, but his experience has led him to Malaysia. His master's degree was in Australia at Wollongong. He's a serial entrepreneur and has done a bunch of really interesting things. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves in their own way and then give their presentation. So we're going to start with Prashant and ask Prashant to introduce himself, give his bullet point thoughts, and then we'll move to Budi and have him do the same thing. If you have questions of clarification, let's take them during the presentation, but let's keep the discussion and the deeper questioning to the end of the session. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And good morning, everybody. It's great to have you here. And it's always great to come back to any Marshall events. This is my second time here in Bali. I was here with my family 10 years ago, 2012. Very similar, I would say more or less same forum. And that was very enjoyable. So I'm very much looking forward to the next 2 days. I live in Boston. I wear 20. So this is my 25th year, Silver Jubilee year from my commencement, 25 years ago, and I had a linear career, corporate career after IBR. I was in management consulting with one of the big threes, and then I joined American Express. That's where I spent much of my linear corporate life, so to say. I was head of businesses in Asia. I was head of the credit risk group during the financial crisis, which I learned a lot from those 4 or 5 years. And then I joined Discover for a couple of years. And then I thought that, I was thinking I could go on and on with my linear career, but I wanted to actually get off the corporate, rat race and, thought about sort of expanding or magnifying my impact to more than one organization. And so I actually went back to school, became a Stone Fellow at MIT, got a second MBA, which was a fantastic program just like IBER. retooled myself, and that year was very wonderful. Although I think the IBL program was the most significant year that I've had, in my entire life, most impactful, because that helped me make the transition. My year at MIT helped me retool myself, create new friends, colleagues, etc., and then also be ready for a advisory consulting role. That's what I do now. So that's my long and long story. Thank you.
Very nice introduction, Prashant. Thanks, Professor Voigt or Carl. Carl's perfect. First of all, I want to say thanks to, I know Anne is not here, but thanks to Anne for enabling this for me to come in. Also to Chandra, my investors from Indian Capital, who asked me to talk as well. So thanks for that, long time support. My old buddy as well. I'm not a USC graduate, but I really love the community. Makes me wonder whether I should take MBA at USC as well.
We can make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so I have always been in entrepreneurship. I started my career actually when I went to Wollongong University for my master's degree. So I work in a bakery. I was speaking to David just now that I learned my Mandarin there. Perfect my Mandarin there, because that's where all the Chinese are at that time, so we learned there. So once I finished my university, I started first online shop. 2004, this is 2004, I had an online shop selling calling cards, international calling cards. If you guys study overseas, you guys from Indonesia study overseas, you probably know you need to buy the IDD calling cards to call back home. I had problem buying that, so I actually digitized it. I set up a site. I learned how to write codes. I set up a site, and I bought a bunch of cards, scratched them, put into Excel spreadsheet, upload online, and just deliver by email. So that leads to this game card distribution. So we become a distributor for game cards in Australia. And essentially we become the game card aggregator for Australia. So 2011, the new business is called All Cash, Online Cash. The most expensive domain name I ever bought, $5,000, allcash.com. Then I eventually sold the business to a Malaysian company called MOL, Money Online. And I came back to Indonesia in 2015 and started Shipper after that. So I'm going to talk more about Shipper later on, but that's my brief history.
Okay, we're up and running. Supply chains. The part of the unseen part of our lives that is arguably the most vital, and we only pay attention to them when things break. More recently, COVID, right? All of a sudden, bam. And, we then also, when we have a war, when we have trade tensions, this is when we start paying attention, because things aren't running as they're supposed to. Those of us in California right now are grateful for the fact that gas prices have broken and come below $6. In fact, the other day I got gas for less than $4 for the first time in a couple of years, I think. I'm not quite sure. Given up just gas prices. These are things that we think about, and then we go, well, what happened? Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Prashant, first of all, to give us some bullet points to think about. As I said, I had a much longer introduction to this, but we started late, so I'm going to skip the introduction, other than to say, thinking carefully and very, very foresightly about supply chains is absolutely critical to the success of businesses and economies. Okay, Prashant.
Thank you, Carl. So I think the first question to ask is why we are seeing this level and this magnitude of global supply chain disruption. That's probably the first question to ask. And so I think there are a lot of theories out there if you can Google and read on the internet. My own theory on this is that So typically, businesses of all sizes and shapes, so whether it's a large mega corporation where I have experiences, or there are startups, the startups, and I do some venture mentoring and help startups. Predominantly, the focus of the organization and people there is on managing the demand side. So businesses has two sides, right? Supply side, demand side, and typically executives, managers, leaders, etc. They focus much more on demand side. There is a focus on revenue and profitability, and some of this is inherent because of let's say public companies, right? They have to report certain level of revenue and profits and projections to keep the stock moving. Or for startups, that's what VCs focus on. So they're like, they ask two questions first, and then the third question. The first question they ask is, do you have a product or a service? And the second question is, do you have customers willing to buy that product or service, right? And then the third question is, how are you going to get that service going, or how you are going to be procuring that product? So the supply side, that's typically third. That's my experience. So what happened here was, I think, as pandemic hit us very quickly, very rapidly, in the beginning of 2020, I think was sometime in spring, right, March. And so at that point, this was a big unknown, where this is going to head. It was, the pandemic was expanding rapidly throughout the world, and even the economists were wondering what kind of impact this would have on businesses and markets. And I think that basically all of us were in we all were hunkering in our bunkers. We actually locked ourselves into homes, stopped going to work. So a lot of, I think, panic. But I think the main question was the unknown. How long will this pandemic last? And nobody could answer that. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was talk about in the beginning about the vaccinations being produced, etc. Thanks to very good partnership between government and private companies like Pfizer, Moderna, etc. to be able to roll out, and FDA, of course, to approve it, at least for emergency authorization. So that was just beginning at that point, that partnership. So the demand side started to die, right? So the demand was impacted mainly at that point. And so the company, one of the companies I advise, is a large, very large Japanese green tea company, Itoen. So the North America business, we started seeing destruction of demand, especially in the service channels. So for example, Itoen sells its products through corporate offices, through restaurants, all the service establishments. That demand died very, very fast. Really from 100 to not even 10 or 5. And so, typical business, like I said in the beginning of making this point, Itoen started to really focus on how do we get the demand going and how do we shift the channel. So can we sell more at Costco? Can we sell more at Trader Joe's? Can we sell more at other channels? So everybody started focusing on demand, and this is very typical. I've seen this everywhere. At American Express, revenue, profitability, customers, demand, size of wallet. So that's a measure to see, how people are, or card members are, using our product versus a Visa or MasterCard. So in the meantime, so a lot of unknowns. So that's a picture. I don't think, we were thinking a lot about what happens when the demand starts coming back. Because it was in distant future it seemed, and we didn't want to even go there at that point. But actually I think one trigger was that thankfully, beyond business or anything, thankfully the vaccines were produced or actually created, invented, whatever you want to say, relatively quickly. By fall of 2020, I think there was signs that vaccines are going to be rolling out on a mass basis very soon. And once that started happening, I think end of 2020, beginning of 21, the demand started to come back. But in the meantime, the supply machinery around the world was idling, right? So if you think about chip factories in China, idling. They didn't want to produce something that was not going to be sold, and nobody knew when the selling will resume, and things like that. Ships were idling, crews were signed off and went home. So this is a typical when you're a factory, you're going to shut down the factory for a while, the startup time and cost can be huge. So to get the supply machinery or supply chain system going, took some time. And in the meantime, the demand started coming back, like really roaring back in some areas, in some industries. So obviously we are seeing, we start to see the imbalance between demand and supply. People talk about inflation. I think inflation is a symptom of the imbalance between demand and supply. There is less supply and there is more demand, and hence the inflation, right? That's economics 101, I think. So we start to see that, and we are in a situation that this supplies, crisis or the supply chain disruption, has continued over time because the demand is coming back. And there are not enough, suppliers or like quick suppliers because of the already, we have a global distributed model for manufacturing. Most of the stuff comes from China, Taiwan, and other places. And I guess one more quick point. By the way, sometime in I think it was fall of 2020, if you might remember, so oil prices were hitting very, very low. In fact, one of the days or maybe one of the weeks, the forward contract on oil was negative, which I didn't understand at all. So I called one of my MIT classmates, Ibrahim, who actually is the CEO of Saudi Aramco Trading. I said, Ibrahim, what does this mean? It's like negative oil? He said, no, there's no storage. We have produced everything, there's no storage left in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else. And therefore, there's no demand for this. I mean, we can't produce anymore because we don't know where to put it. We have even filled the ships and they will line them up in jetties or whatever. So, but when demand started to come back, and oil prices, go with the economic cycles, and there's a lot of psychology behind that. Oil prices started to rise. That is a big factor in terms of the price of supply, right? Because we have, of course, we have quite a few EV vehicles on the floor, the cars, but we don't have EV trucks, we don't have EV ships, we don't have EV nothing, right? So as the oil prices started to go up very quickly, we started seeing inflationary, pressure, on the supply side. So all of this combined in a quick, launch or introduction of vaccines, turning around the situation, coupled with the fact that typically I think organizations really focus on demand side more than supply. They focus on supply, but demand is always like on top of the mind. And then the related linkage to how oil prices behave over this time. I think all of that combined. I'm sure there are other factors combined to this situation that we are facing. So that's my long answer. Sorry for the long answer.
Do we have any quick questions or clarification on points that Prashant has shared with us, or we'll keep our subsequent questions there? Stand up. Thank you.
One that you mentioned about the oil prices.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask more on that, like when it was negative, wasn't it adding to your favor? Is it a
Let's keep that as a question for the follow-up, okay? All right, let's keep that as a substantive discussion point, okay? All right, Budi.
Thank you. I'm gonna bring you all back to Indonesia and to a particular industry, which is e-commerce industry, because that's where we are at. So when I came back to Indonesia, one of the main reasons I came back to Indonesia is because, one, my family is here, but number two, I saw the next boom is going to happen in Indonesia. We learned how China started an e-commerce wave in 1999 with Alibaba, and then a few years later we saw India with Snapdeal, Flipkart, all the tech boom is actually growing there. Then for me, I started thinking, where is the next country? So at that time there were three options of the country. One is Indonesia, for obvious reasons, the number of people here. And number two is Brazil. Brazil is also, there's a lot of people. And number three is Pakistan. The latter two is actually quite difficult because Brazil, very hard to do business there. I'm not sure whether you guys do any business there, but it doesn't allow foreigners to do business there well. And Pakistan, I think, is not politically stable to run a business there. I think for the major reason, right? So I think the obvious reason was Indonesia. That's why I came back to Indonesia. And at that time, the news that we have SoftBank invested about 100 million in Tokopedia, if you remember that. And then we have Matahari.com, Matahari Mall was promised about 500 million by Lipo Group. We have Lazada acquired by Alibaba, and Shopee was starting. So Bukalapak has been around for about 5 or 6 years. So I think that was a catalyst of e-commerce boom. And at the same time, when I was back here, I was trying to ship something. I went to an offline store. When I want to ship a document, what did I do? I need to fill up a document, a paper, origin, destination, and what you ship and how long, and just manual form. And I need to wait in line for about 1 hour and to get served for one document. And then, yeah, it takes too much time. So if you link the two of them with the e-commerce boom and the time to ship a parcel, what will happen? Chaotic for the growth. So I thought there's a problem here to be solved, because I don't want to be in the situation I have to line up for 1 hour to ship parcels again. And that's how Shipper was actually started. We thought we should build a platform, because I'm a technology based, I'm a coder, I'm a programmer by nature. I write a code, build a small team to allow people to ship products through a platform. And then we will go and pick up from them. Parcel pickup wasn't common in Indonesia at that time. So allow us to pick up from the customers, and the customer doesn't need to come to the agency anymore. So we do all the work. Right? So that's how we started off. And of course, before we do that, before I even start that, I look into what other business I can do. Like e-commerce needs a lot of money, payment. Normally e-commerce is followed by payment or logistics, right? So payments, I was in payment, so I knew the pain of having a payment business, and we need to know the regulators, we need to know all the government people. So I was a newbie in Indonesia at that time for business, so I didn't know anybody. So I thought logistics was a good choice as well. So that's a supporting factor. And number 3, the technology actually was building up. All the third-party logistics actually start to have technology, surprisingly, API technology to connect, right, for third-party. So it looks like everything comes aligned and enable us to do this business. And that's how we started Shipper. Along the way, we launched in 2017 officially. Along the way, we start to think what's next for us, right? This is still in line with e-commerce logistics. What's next for e-commerce logistics? The merchants are growing, the goods that they sell are growing, because there's a lot of, on average, the number of growth, e-commerce growth is higher than the number of merchant growth. So what does that mean? That means a merchant sells more every single day than previously. So because of that, then you'll see people, they used to fulfill the e-commerce products from their house. But when you grow, you will have problems with that, because you run out of space, you don't have space to even eat properly. I experienced that to some customers, they don't have space to do things properly, activities properly, right? So they are near the warehouse. So then we have another problem. What's the problem in the warehouse in Indonesia? Well, multiple, I can mention about 5. Number 1, you need a long-term rent payment, like you need to pay 1 year in advance. Number 2, you probably only need a small space, right? Small space, you don't need the whole shop house. You probably need about 100 square meters only. And it's not worth paying for the whole floor. So that's number 2. Number 3, we talk about the management of the goods. You don't have a software to manage the goods, because it's really difficult to when you do fulfillment 10 orders a day, it's easy. You want to make any mistake. But when you start to do 100 orders, 500 orders a day, you need a proper system to do that. Number 4, you don't have the people. Like, people actually need to be trained. You need to really have train people and how to pack better how to pack the goods without any mistakes, because mistake is fatal in e-commerce. Normally, it's not about how fast you can ship, but how accurate can you ship as well. So we measure those metrics, accuracy of the fulfillment as well as speed of fulfillment in our warehouse. And number 5 is actually the safety of the goods. Like if you have a warehouse to manage your own, you probably don't know what's missing. You probably don't have the tight security. You know, all these people who work in a warehouse, they have millions of ways to steal your goods. They have millions of ways to steal your goods. Even we experience customers, workers who actually work with the courier company. They will disguise a box with the good stuff in there and just smuggle it in as a normal parcel that they ship. Right? They have millions of ways, and when you lose the product, what will happen? You bite your fingers because there's nobody to pay back. Right? You don't know who is stealing them. So, but we are responsible for those goods. If you, I mean, for us, right? If they stole with us, we are responsible for the goods. So we thought that's actually a good opportunity for us to get into this business, and that's how we started a fulfillment business. We tested 2018, and 2019 we acquired a fulfillment company called Bali, and we started doing that larger scale. So fast forward, now we have around, we operate in about 35 cities, the same business, shipping, which is first mile pickups. We have a lot of agents. We have about 6,000 agents across Indonesia to do the pickup for us. We run about 300 warehouses across Indonesia. The reason why we have that many warehouses is because one of the main concepts we want to build is like FBA concept, where you can have your goods stored in multiple locations, and when somebody closer to the warehouse buy the goods, then you can do shipping. Because shipping, one of the problems for Indonesia, logistic cost is expensive, about 27% of GDP, mainly because there's a lot of islands, and you need air freight to do that. Air freight is expensive. So we have warehouses near to the customers, say to the east. The shipping will be just a normal domestic shipping, right? Because shipping bulk to that location is a lot cheaper than shipping just single items. So those are that's a business that we've built. Maybe you can. I have prepared a small slides, PPT. Yeah, can you just skip to the next page? Yeah, so along the way, from the start until now, we get that there's 3 big problems for e-commerce industry. One is the 3PL is too fragmented. You know, before shipper was around, the 3PLs, they have their own service, but we don't know how much they actually have until we go, how much is the price for shipping from A to B until you actually go there and actually ask for them. And you don't know the SLA, how long will it take to deliver. You don't know the accuracy of the SLA as well. And imagine there's thousands of them, and every single city, they also have these traditional 3PLs, right? So it's too fragmented, the information is everywhere. And number 2 is expensive, 27% of GDP as I mentioned earlier, mainly because of the islands position that we have. It's not something that we can solve easily, but we are moving towards that direction. And the government is also very supportive in that. You see, during this Jokowi government, they actually built a lot of tollways that would cut short a lot of transport time. However, there's still a challenge with that. If you're in a trucking business, you probably know that the truckers actually prefer to use a small route instead of the toll route because they actually find a lot of entertainments along that route. They can rest well, because if you do toll road, you pay toll, it's faster, but they feel it's not the actual route. So I think there's more work needs to be done to push them to actually use the toll route better instead of just going through the traditional route. Maybe make the toll rate cheaper as well, because when you build a toll rate, costs you more than actually the time that you need for the traditional route. It then defeats the whole purpose as well. So, but I think overall we are moving into the direction. And number 3 is actually merchants have this bad working capital. As we have warehouse, We actually work with the merchants closer and closer. And a lot of these people, these merchants, what they have is actually goods. They don't have a lot of cash because their asset is the goods for them to sell. So once they buy the goods, then they are lack of cash. And the growth is limited to what they can sell only. Right? So they complain to us there's a lot of working capital issue. They don't have money to buy more goods. So we decided we think that this is actually an opportunity that we should look into as well, how we can enable them to have a better working capital. So, and out of this, there's actually no single company that integrating all these different data points to provide a single source of truth. Can we move to the next slide, please? And that's what we do. We actually, I'm not gonna talk about this very quickly, long, but basically we just provide a single platform to enable multiple sellers from multiple platforms to ship, to store, as well as to get more capital. We connected to a lot of e-commerce application already. We have warehouses and we have a lot of 3PL that works with us. Can we move to the next slide, please? So during our building time, we count this from 2018. The reason why, because that's when we actually get into Y Combinators. We get into YC, we get into the growth mode. We have become #1 e-commerce logistics platform right now. We built asset-light business. We have grown quite a lot, and we have reputable investors. We have Indonesia in there as well, the brand, the logo. And so we have agents, we have logistics providers, we have warehouses, and we in the company, Phil and I, Phil is my partner. We were thinking, how can we grow further, right? So with those different problems that we have earlier on, then we started to think, I think we should go further. We should have our next phase of business. So if we go to the next slide, we call this a $1 trillion opportunity. So we're still gonna grow our core logistic business, which is what we're good at right now. We actually provide a lot of services for e-commerce company. We provide warehousing for Shopee, for Matahari.com. We provide first mile logistics for Lazada. So we are very good at what we do. I can guarantee you that. But we need to grow more, right? So how do we do that? Merchants, they actually sells online. They have to do manually on every single platform, inventory. So we want to provide them with the software for them to manage the inventory, to manage their sales in one platform. Yes, we have existing business around, but it's not end-to-end integrated to the warehousing or shipping like what we do. And the reason why we do this is actually for us to be able to acquire, to help more merchants to have an integrated and more single source of truth for their operations. And number three that we want to do is actually to provide working capital for these merchants. That's why we want to build shipper capital. We have started working with different peer-to-peer financing company. We work with different banks to provide capital for us to channel this capital to our merchants. And this is actually one of the ways for us to increase our ticket size. A lot of people ask, why do you do this in your business? One is actually to acquire more customers. Number two is actually to increase the ticket size of the customer. Imagine you have goods in our warehouse and you want to sell more, you want to grow more. We give them more money to buy more goods, and the goods are stored in our warehouse safely, securely as a collateral. And if they can't pay, we just sell the goods, right? But they have more goods to sell, they have more hand service fee they have to pay us, they have more shipping fee they have to pay us. I think it's a win-win situation. And that's why we call this a $1 trillion opportunity, because the growth opportunity is unlimited with the growth of e-commerce in the country. Yeah. I think that's all that we have, that I have here. And happy to take any questions or discuss further on other stuff. Thank you, Carl.
So before we open up the broad questions, do you have any specific points of clarification for Budi before we open the discussion to more general questions on the entire topic of supply chains in a post-COVID era?
Actually, I want to talk more about COVID a little bit on this.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, COVID was a blessing in disguise for us, right? I mean, when COVID happens, we didn't know what's going to happen. We thought, oh man, what are we going to do? Like, do we do layoff? Do we have to stop? We have to do salary cut because it's gonna be bad for business. But surprisingly, COVID actually have accelerated. Carl mentioned in our early discussion on the sofa that COVID has accelerated the e-commerce, digital growth 7 to 10 years. Right? That's a very good sign for us because then people start shopping online. And luckily, we're actually in e-commerce logistics. We're not in normal logistics, right? We're in e-commerce logistics. So that drives a lot of business for us because a few reasons. One, people who used to store their goods at home, now they don't want to do that anymore because they don't want people to come to their house and work there. Right? So they'll just send it to the warehouse. Number two, people who used to get the courier to come and pick up from their house, multiple couriers, like you have triple A, B, C, D, E. Now you only need one courier, which is us, one guy. Probably you fully submitted him to come and pick up the goods and just leave, right? So those two factors actually drive our business a lot, and we actually grow about 4x during the COVID period. And I think that's really a blessing in disguise for us. And I'm not saying it's good, but it's actually something that we didn't expect. And we also see a lot of shifting in trends. People who normally they would sell fashion accessories, clothing, right, all the beauty stuff. But then when COVID hits, guess what? Everybody is switching. They sell masks, they sell hand sanitizers, so increase a lot of health category for us. And midway, starting last year, because people are bored, then cosmetics actually growing. You can see a lot of growth in cosmetics. They want to they have more time to beautify themselves, so you can see that category grow in our business as well. So it's quite funny to see how these patterns actually changing in the COVID or even post-COVID syndrome situation right now.
Thank you. All right, so let's open it up to questions. If you have a question, do me a favor, stand up, give your name. If you want to share a fact about how we can connect with you, your business, your relationship to USC. And let's open it up for discussion, sharing ideas. Who's got the first question?
Thank you for the insight session. My name is Kaz and I'm from Japan. I'm one of the eyewear MBA students. Let me ask one broad question. As you touched in the conversations, the company's management realized that importance of reliable supply chain network again. So additionally, in these days, the global politics tense is rising gradually. Like, of course, Ukraine invasion and the relationship between China and Taiwan. So my question is, under these difficult and unforeseen situations, how and what should we prepare to build a strong, reliable supply chain, global supply chain network? Could you please share your?
Who would like to take a shot at that one?
Let me get started to try and answer that question. And that's a great question, by the way, Kaz, and welcome to the session. So I think, as you think about strategy, and Carl had a terrific masterclass yesterday. I really thoroughly enjoyed how to think about good strategy, bad strategy, how to differentiate, etc. Very interesting. I would just add to that as you think about coming up with strategy, right? One of the things that I've learned over my corporate career, working with amazing leaders, is that you got to have a set of principles, right? So what are the principles that you're going to use to come up with a strategy or to address a problem, right? So in this situation, I think we still have a lot of unknowns. Unknowns are right now about the geopolitical dynamics. There's still remnant, unknowns about COVID, whether we'll have new variants or not, etc. So there's a lot of noise still in the system. But beyond that, if we were to go back and do it all over again in terms of designing supply chains, And my context mostly is from the services industry, which is very important. Most of the economies, services forms 30, 40, 50, and upwards of 60%, depending on which economy or country we're talking about. I think India is the service industry contribute to, and don't quote me on this because my data is dated, but it's well over 60%. So it's very important. Typically, when you think about supply chain, you think about the tangible physical goods, but services are, very growing contribution margin of overall GDP in business. So, in terms of principles, right? So I can just give you principles that I use at American Express to build a robust service supply model. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you context real quick. So this was back in 2012. Amex was very good about, or still very good about, surveying employees and understanding their issues and what hurdles and roadblocks that they are facing and any new ideas. And one of the consistent themes we were picking up in the employee surveys was this thing about flexibility. So these employees are call center agents typically, and there are, I think Amex at this point has probably upwards of 15,000 call center frontline, agents who take inbound calls and service customers. They wanted a more flexible schedule, and part of that they were voicing an idea about home-based strategy. So can these agents be located at home instead of coming to work every day to a call center and actually still be able to service? Of course, we jumped into it, and it's always a huge win-win when you are able to meet, a sort of demand or idea or a request coming from employees, if it's worth, for the business. So we jumped into it, and Amex is a big conservative company. Wall Street took 2 years to get past, internal compliance and legal hurdles to be able to set up workstations in people's homes. And we actually did a pilot, and that was very successful. So one of the principles there was about flexibility. So the 3 things I came up with, I used to be head of the Amex US servicing business, and I think the first was ride shoring. Second one was one optimal network. This kind of ties into what Carl was speaking about Walmart strategy, how they have a system of supply that services multiple stores. So one optimal network, and I'll explain to you, like in a second, and then sort of broaden very quickly about how these principles may apply on the, the good side of the supply chain. So one optimal network, ride shoring, and then third was more about people. So creating passion to serve in the, in terms of the call center agents, really upping the game on their capabilities, their thinking, to be able to equip them with the right level of management tools and thinking tools, etc., so that they can service increasingly sophisticated customers. New generations are much more sophisticated, by the way, in how they think. And also, Amex wanted to focus on, so they have a consumer card business, which is like personal cards, and then they have corporate card, which they have 75% of the global market share. So those were like saturated segments. The up and growing segment is the small business. Always has been. This is the area that almost every US presidential candidate comes with. How to serve the small business, because they are the engine for job growth and they are really the future of the growing economy. So anyway, the small business customers, they needed more sophisticated skills on part of the call center agents to be able to serve, because small businesses needed not just regular customer service, but they had questions about some accounting, and we were able to provide value-added services, the business charges onto, on like spreadsheets and valuable data, etc. So the issue there was that we did not have enough educated people on the US side to serve these customers. In US, call center agents, typically are high school graduates, and so they're good, but they're not as sophisticated as the needs of the business on the customer side. So we actually went out to explore, can we do this work from Asia? and particularly India and Philippines. And Amex was the first major player in the entire global financial industry to actually establish the first center in India to be able to outsource and get the outsource service going for the English-speaking markets, which included US, UK, New Zealand, and Australia. So, idea there was really to up the game on the supply side. This is supply of talent, right? Supply of resources. Part of one optimal network, and this again applies to the goods part of the supply chain, is that we have one network, and my vision was that I wanted to have a control room. We had a huge technology office, infrastructure and office in Phoenix, Arizona. There would be a global control room with just like a simple dial, and you are able to send these service volumes. When the calls are coming in, where should they land? It's critical, right? So that you are able to dial up, dial down, US versus Canada versus India, Philippines, etc. At the switch of the button. So that was the idea of an optimal network, so seamlessly moving the volume around depending upon where that volume needs to be served. And right shoring was really about, right shoring means where you want what kind of call to be serviced. So if it's a platinum card member, like high end, only US. If it's about a call and, somebody wants to call and collect money from card member, that was India. If you needed more sophisticated offshore servicing, Philippines was very, very good because the Philippines, people in Philippines much more closely aligned to the US thinking, and they were able to, and they were much more customer service oriented, so we were able to send that volume to Philippines. So seamless, one optimal network at the highest level, right shoring, because this is where the structure drives success. You can have all kinds of talented people around the world, but unless you're sending them the right service type of call type, they won't be very successful. So create the structure and the system and principles where we are able to, where the structure drives success. And then third is of course people, so creating passion to serve. So I think the way it applies here is in our context of supply chain is, creating a well-distributed supply network. So this company that I consult with, that I mentioned earlier, for the last 20 years, I have had the 100% import-oriented model. So all the ready-to-drink teas and tea bags were being made in Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, etc. So when this pandemic hit, and one of the questions I always ask myself, and I ask typically people on my team is, what are you proud of and what keeps you up in the night? And I think when people ask me that, my typical answer is, what I'm proud of usually is the team that I've built, finding the best people I could find. What keeps me up in the night is what I don't know, or what my team doesn't know. Those are the critical questions. So one of the things about this company that I advised was, I talk to CEO and CEO, and I mentor a bunch of the group company presidents and SVPs, etc. Is continuously think about what you don't know. And so one of the things that I think we realized, and I saw it early on, was what we did not know was if there is a major disruption in this, what happens to this company? In terms of the viability of business model. So what's happening here is the containers that we were importing from Japan, about $2,000 per container worth of tea, at the peak was coming in at $35,000. So the cost of landed goods, impossible to do business. You cannot raise price at any meaningful way to be able to have landed goods and still make a profit. Very, very difficult, almost impossible, actually really impossible. So have a well-distributed network, right shoring, so some onshore, some near shore would be, like for US, a lot of manufacturing is in Mexico, where you are not dependent, especially, particularly on ocean freight, trucks can come in, etc. So, sort of optimal distribution of onshore, so in North America, manufacturing, near shore, and then far shore. Far shore, gives us the cost arbitrage, it's cheaper, but the assumption there is that, shipping rates will always remain historically low, which is not the case here, right? So that changed the equation. So in this case, we are bringing much more manufacturing onshore to be able to build that robust model. So distribution is, I think, is very important. And I think the second one is, and I think Budi, you sort of touched upon that, is 3PL, third-party providers. Manufacturing may or may not be core to your business. If it's not core, how much can you outsource? And then can you build a robust and reliable network of vendors and suppliers? I think the Japanese model is fantastic. So how Toyota built its supply network. Two of the major suppliers I believe are, I'm a car mechanic and an enthusiast, so I know these things from my hobby. Toyota has Nippon Denso, and they have the other one is Aishin. Two robust suppliers that they nurture. I think Toyota has 25% stake in both the companies, and they are dedicated to Toyota. And I think a lot of manufacturing, I think in past used to be in Japan and around, but I know they manufacture in China and other places. But Toyota almost has first right to denial on the supplies, and they can sell to other car companies, other manufacturers, but Toyota is the priority. So building a system like that, I think, especially if you're big, if you're small or mid-size, that's different, but you can still think about in those terms. So having a good combination of third-party suppliers, they could be onshore, nearshore, farshore, can be very helpful. And so, just back to Amex, my one last point, as we build this global service model, one of my principles was 2/3 servicing from MS proprietary call centers, so Amex employees, 1/3 from third-party providers, who would take call as Amex employees. So if you call me, fall into a third-party supplier, like a Converges or Cytel, big companies, but when the call is picked up, they would say, thank you for calling American Express. And the part of that, doing that is the flexibility. When we are in good times, good economy, we need more volume, we can expand the third-party network. When we are going through rough patches, financial crisis, pandemic, etc., volume is down, service volume in this case, we can reduce the number of suppliers or the volume at suppliers more easily, because we don't have to worry about the fixed infrastructure costs of our call centers and our employees and impact to them in terms of hiring and firing and all that. So flexibility is the other principle. So I know a long answer, but hopefully that gives you a framework.
Budi, what you add?
Yes, I'm gonna add on the context that I know, which is the industry that I'm in. The Russian and Ukraine war has impacted on the petrol price quite a lot, increase the petrol price. And in logistics, everything is about petrol. Motorbike, cars, airplane, it's all about petrol price. So that impacts actually the logistic costs. All the works that we've built to lower down the logistic costs actually gone down the drain because of that. And it becomes increase the price again. So we can see a lot of third-party logistics actually started to raise the price. And even our internal usage, where we do pickups, all the vans and the motorbikes that we use, the petrol price have increased. And then, to add salt to the wound, the government actually increased the minimum wage in Jakarta next year, about 10%, right? So that actually puts a lot of pressure into us, and we have to think big on how do we solve that. And I think luckily, actually there's one more thing on top of that. I think government is going to put on a carbon tax in the petrol next year. I think they were planning to do it this year, but they postponed it to next year. Carbon tax is another expenses. So I think we really have to think big on how we want to do that and how we're going to solve that problems. And I think luckily, all the vibes around ESG during the B20, everybody's talking about ESG, and Indonesia is actually now very big in ESG, all the nickels mining, EV. So we started exploring that, right? Started exploring how do we do transport with EV. So we trial on motorbikes for the pickups using EV. We trial on some third wheelers using EV. We are working with some providers for EV van as well. Because although the rental price is probably going to be more expensive on daily uses, but the petrol is actually eliminated altogether. And I think that's one of the things moving forward, where we'll see a lot of these battery-powered vehicles gonna rule the logistics market, mainly because the petrol price is uncontrollable, right? So, but what does that conclude at? It concludes that, hey, we as a company, we need to prepare for the worst. We need to really have a BCP, business continuity plan on what will happen if this happens, what will happen if that happens, right? What should we do? Say now we say rental price, because we're asset light, we do warehouse rentals. So what happens if the rental market now increase, like Singapore condominium market increased by 50%, the rental, what will happen, right? So what are all the backup plans? So to be honest, we haven't done that. We haven't been very disciplined in that. We are very reactive, which is not good, but deep inside, that's something that we need to do. It's just time priorities are not there yet, but I think we all need to think about how to solve that kind of issues. So having BCP in place, I think will be good. Yeah.
All right, any more questions? Let's go, David.
Okay, David Chen, IB7. I come from Taiwan. According to the weather report, Taipei now is 6 Celsius, 6 degrees Celsius. But I feel much colder here. And someone turned down the aircon.
We're trying to keep you awake.
Okay, yes. Okay, according to the war, the disease, COVID-19, the long supply chain becomes short supply chain. Long supply chain means globalization, and short supply chain means localization. Back to my year, there's a word, actually it's combined of 2 words. One is cooperation. One is competition. So combined with competition. Question for you guys, is competition come again? Is that possible in the future?
All right, we'll try to get a couple of comments. We're going to be short on time. We started late, so we've lost a lot of good questions. The short version, I don't agree with the idea that the world is going to, we've lost globalization. I don't agree with that. I do believe very strongly that globalization and supply chains and our relations with other countries has to be much more nuanced. We have to think much more carefully. The kinds of things that Budi is doing, talking about where you're sourcing different parts and so forth. I see evidence of economies still wanting to write free trade agreements and to work in a collaborative way. I think that people are being much more aware of where differences exist. I think we were perhaps too naive that everybody could get along and trade issues would go away. But I still think that the need to deliver better quality services at better prices in a world that continues to change will drive business people to seek new and innovative solutions. That's my take.
Thank you, Carl. So what I'd add is, I totally agree that the globalization train has already left. That's not coming back. I think what will happen is, as we go through, the learning from pandemic, and I think we need crisis, right, to be able to make changes, because that compels us to rethink. As the saying goes, the necessity is the mother of all inventions. But in this case, I think what's going to happen is readjustment and reassessment. So for this tea company that I mentioned earlier, so for them, what they make in bottles, the ready to drink, that maybe doesn't need to come from Taiwan or Thailand, long chain. And there is a cost to it because the value to weight ratio is much lower. But as you think about high-end matcha tea or tea bags and high-end stuff, that can continue to come from Japan, for example, because that's lighter and higher value. So I think there's going to be adjustment and readjustment. Going back to the principles I laid out earlier, right shoring. So what's that optimal mix of right shore, near shore and far shore, and how do you distribute your product portfolio based on the value and of making X in US versus making Y in Mexico or Japan or Taiwan. I think that's all going to be reassessed because there's no way out. If the container cost is going to be as high as, I think it's to my early example, from 2,000 went to 35,000 per container, now it's down to about 10 or 12. That's too high to be able to sustain a business.
Yeah, I think in e-commerce, globalization is still there. You can see a lot of Like people who produce a lot of goods like China, they're trying to actually fulfill the e-commerce sales from China itself. So they're putting their goods in China in the e-commerce platform, and the ship are coming from China. And the same with Indonesia. I think a lot of these local brands, or even every country, right, they're trying to have the goods presence in multiple marketplaces and trying to fulfill from their own country to the other country. Instead of, one way of doing that is actually ship the goods to the country, doing localization, and fulfill from the local marketplace. So there's pro and con in that, obviously, but I think globalization, the fulfillment from origin country is probably something that's still preferred by a lot of people, mainly because the storage cost is centralized, the quality control is centralized. The only thing that is not controllable is actually the shipping price. And that is where the focus of all these big players like Alibaba, JD, Shopee are trying to fix, where they want to streamline the shipping or logistics for e-commerce, so everything can come in within a short period of time, just like the domestic shipping, right? So that's being worked on, and tremendously a lot of work is being done there. And while at the same time, a lot of people trying to do fulfillment from that origin country. So there's no right way of winning right now. We don't know who's winning, or which way is the best way. There's pro and con on each. So we just have to wait and see if the government actually supporting that streamlined logistics, because a lot of bottleneck is in shipping and also in the custom clearance, right? If the government is supporting of that, then I'm sure the fulfillment from the origin country will be good. Look at China; they ship Shein from China to all over the world, right? And they are actually doing very well in that. But obviously, they want to improve on that as well, where they have a better shipping time, and they have this principle of the train channel to European countries. All that they just want to simplify to make sure that the shipping is fast. And I think that will be for us to see in the future.
You can start late, but you can never finish late. So we unfortunately used our time at the beginning for questions, and so the time's up. So thank you so much. I want to thank Prashant. I want to thank Budi for being here, and we really appreciate you. The conversation, I hope, will continue at the break and at lunch and so forth. All right, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our distinguished moderator. To present the token of appreciation, we kindly invite to join us on stage Mr. David Luft, representative of IBER student from Chile. We kindly please Mr. David to present the token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists. And to our distinguished moderator for this session. And now we would like to invite to take a photo session together. Let's take a position at the center of the stage. Okay, give your best smile on my count. 1, 2, 3. One more time. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of big applause once again? Thank you for a very insightful panel discussion this morning. Thank you to our honorable panelists and of course our moderator for successfully leading the panel session this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our first panel session of supply chains disruption. And now, please allow me to invite you to enjoy the coffee break and networking session. We will have 15 minutes of break, ladies and gentlemen. Coffee and snacks already provided at the foyer area of this ballroom. For those of you who would like to continue enjoying our second panel session, please kindly return to your seat after 15 minutes. marked by the ring bell and announcement. And for those of you who would like to switch room, please mind your personal belongings. We will continue after break with our second panel session about sustainability. Enjoy your break, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.